Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in live this evening. It is Monday, July the 8th, 2019. Hope that everyone's new week is off to a great start so far, and that you were able to enjoy this past holiday weekend and all the July 4th festivities. Looking forward to tonight's episode. Going to be joined by guest Marilyn Barron coming up in the following segment. I met Marilyn earlier this year at an event in the Atlanta area that we were both reading at called A Novel Idea. She was presenting from her recent book, The Saffron Conspiracy, that evening. So we'll be talking more about that book as well as all her other novels, including the forthcoming book, The Romanov Conspiracy. Also we'll be talking about a lot of other projects she has going on at the moment and events she'll be reading at in the months ahead. So stay tuned for that coming up shortly. Here at the top of the episode, I did want to encourage listeners to please subscribe to the channel. It's quick and free and easy. Just click on the follow button found above the slideshow here on the page where the episode is streaming, and that will get you set up to receive notifications for all the future episodes and the guests that are lined up in the months ahead. There's also an archive available on the channel, and that archive to past episodes is also available at my website, 17numa.com. If there's anyone who's interested in appearing as a future guest on the program, you can contact me via email at 17numa@gmail.com or connect with me and send a message on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Always looking to connect with other writers and artists, musicians, really anyone who's inspired about the work they do in the world, no matter what it is, and has a unique song to sing. That's what this program is all about. So if you're interested in appearing as a guest, or you know someone else who might be, please do spread the word and get in contact with me. It's greatly appreciated. The phone lines will be open for tonight's show at 646-668-8757. So if you have a question for tonight's guest, please do call in, and I'll give that number out again a little bit later in the show. Going to go to a quick music break. This is a melody of songs from the musical Memory Lane, which Marilyn Barron wrote, and thought this would be a good introduction, and then we'll be back on the other side with tonight's guest. Stay tuned.
Memory lane, keep us in mind when your mind's not the same. Memory lane, we're here to help each Tom, Dick, and Jane. The more your thoughts have lasted, with every loss of synapses, your nerve cells are attacked. When your brain forms all that sticky plaque. Memory lane, we cannot help you, not gone insane.
I can't remember where I left my keys. Would you help me, please? Did I ever drive? Do I have a car? How'd I ever drive I do remember my license snatched away. I won't forget that day. So what a light I ran. The officers were ruthless. They branded me a useless old man. That I remember.
Welcome to the Pink Hotel, not the Inn of Holiday. We're not the number 6 motel. This is first class all the way. Let me get your bags and coat. You're staying, I assume. Why doesn't anyone have a coat?
It's Florida.
I'll show you to your room.
We don't have room.
Could I be falling in love? I think I remember the feeling. I think that's the feeling I'm feeling right now. My heart can't stop racing. Could what I be facing be love? I just can't stop thinking about you. I don't want to be living without you.
Don't wanna do good. Don't wanna do great things. Don't care if I make things a little bit better. Don't wanna do good. I feel like I'm misunderstood. I just wanna get out of here. I'm not happy to volunteer. Don't wanna do good. Don't wanna do good. Don't wanna do good. Don't wanna do G-O-O-D good.
Don't worry about me, 'cause I'll be just fine. Just fondly remember, and please don't cry, 'cause I may not remember you tomorrow, honey. But for now, Sonny, goodbye. Don't worry about me, 'cause I'll be alright. I'm kicking and screaming. Inside I still fight. So if I don't remember you tomorrow, honey, don't bet on it. Don't lay down money, honey. I live each day for today, Sonny. So goodbye, Sonny, goodbye. Goodbye, Sonny, goodbye.
Memory lane, keep us in mind when your mind's not the same. Memory lane, we cannot test you, not gone insane.
All right, welcome back to Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. That was a melody of tracks from the musical Memory Lane that our guest wrote along with her sister. And without further ado, going to read the bio for Marilyn Barron and then bring her onto the program. Marilyn Barron writes in a variety of genres, from women's fiction to historical romantic thrillers and romantic suspense to paranormal fantasy. She and her sister even wrote a musical about Alzheimer's called Memory Lane that was performed as a concert and reading at Essential Theater in Atlanta in February, and plans are for it to be performed at a theater in Jacksonville Beach, Florida this November. Marilyn has received writing awards in single title, suspense romance, novel with strong romantic elements, and paranormal fantasy romance. She was also the finalist in the 2017 Georgia Author of the Year Awards in the romance category for her novel Stumblestones, and the finalist for the 2018 Gaia Awards in the romance category for her novel The Alibi. Her latest novel, The Saffron Conspiracy, released in January, is her 24th work of fiction. She is currently working on another novel, The Romanov Legacy, and she's co-authored a novel with her sister called Groundwork for Murder that will be released on July 10th. A public relations consultant in Atlanta, she is chair of the Roswell Reed Steering Committee and serves on the Atlanta Authors Series Committee. A member of Atlanta Writers Club, Georgia Romance Writers, and a PAN member of Romance Writers of America, she will be presenting at the 2019 Decatur Book Festival and will be presenting a workshop at the 2019 Georgia Romance Writers Conference in Atlanta. Thank you so much for joining the program tonight, Marilyn. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Great to have you on, and a lot to talk about here this evening, but I guess a good place to start would be with the musical that you wrote that we just listened to some of the songs from, Memory Lane. Could you talk a little bit about what inspired that project and what it was like working with your sister on it?
Yes, actually we've been working on this for 7 years. It's hard to believe, but we just realized that. We were at our condo in Florida, my beach condo in Florida, and Sharon lives in Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra Beach. So she came over and we started writing it. We were inspired by a number of things. Her daughter, my niece, Annika Goldman, had volunteered for 2 summers in high school at an adult daycare facility for Alzheimer's patients in Jacksonville Beach. And she was the model for our character, Sunny. And also our mother, Lorraine Myers, she was a singer, and she's got dementia now. So we're sort of living with it. And at the time, 7 years ago, it wasn't really so bad. And so we could craft this sort of lighthearted but poignant play, and now there's nothing really funny about it. But yes, it was wonderful working with her, and it brought us a lot closer together.
Really,
so it's a topic that's close to our hearts. We just wanted to talk about, get an appreciation and understanding about Alzheimer's patients, and sort of dedicated to the caregivers who spend so much time taking care of the patients.
Absolutely. It's not just hard on the family, but those, like you just mentioned, that are taking care of them. My grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's for years before passing away, and it's the untold tale that it takes on the aunts and uncles and parents and everyone that is around it. So I can understand getting that message out. Was that the first time you've ever worked on a musical or a play?
Well, yes, actually. Well, when I was 13, I had my brother and sisters and some of the neighborhood kids. I guess I wrote a play, and we raised money for the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. I think we raised about $13, but at the time it sounded like a lot. So we sent it in and we got a letter. And I often wrote scripts for school, high school assembly programs. And Sharon has written songs for a playwright friend of hers. But actually, we didn't, it was sort of like we didn't know we couldn't do it. We just did it. And we were sort of naive enough to think that we could write a musical. So it took a long, it took a long time. It was a long process because we wrote the music, and then we had to have it, in order to get it in front of theaters, we had to get the orchestration done, and then we got singers in from Orlando, and we had them sing the songs, and then we had the actual piano music. And then we got this opportunity at Essential Theater to put it on. They did a reading, which is sort of an enhanced reading because it included the music. We had a music director, and we had a lot of rehearsals, and it was really exciting. And then we're going to theater in Jacksonville Beach wants to put it on in November. So it's exciting, but it does take a long time.
Absolutely.
But we're really happy with how it came out.
So you say you wrote your first musical back when you were 13 years old, so you've been
right.
writing all your life.
Really I don't think it was a musical. I think it was just a play at that time. So this is really the first musical. Mm-hmm.
So you've been.
But I've been writing since I was really young. I mean, writing short stories and things like that. But I didn't really start getting into writing novels till probably about 2012.
Okay, so very recently. What was it back in those early years that inspired you to start writing initially?
Well, I always, I knew I was always going to be a writer. That was just my favorite thing to do. And then when I was ready to go to college, I wanted to major in journalism. And I remember my father saying, you can't, make a living doing that. You can be a teacher or something else. But I ended up not doing that, and I majored in journalism, and then I went into public relations. So I really have been writing my whole career, but it wasn't creative writing. But I majored in journalism and creative writing at University of Florida. So I always wanted to be a writer. I always had to write something.
And then you said just recently in 2012 you took that turn toward the creative outlet. Was there a moment in time or some sort of circumstances that let you take that leap into a new genre?
Well, I think it was joining Georgia Romance Writers, and they have, craft classes, and they have contests and conferences, and then, I sort of met everybody else who was a writer just like me, and that it just went from there. I mean, you just learn from other people, and you learn from taking the courses and being in the organization, and that's when I started writing and then trying to get published.
And you've obviously been on a rampage. It's your 24th work of fiction coming out shortly. So
right. They're not all books. Maybe, I started writing actually short stories before that, and with a company called TWB Press in Colorado. It's a small publisher, and then I went on to write novels.
And what was your first novel that you released, and how do you think?
Okay, it was one of my favorites. It actually took like 10 years to write. I mean, I have been writing all this time, but I didn't really know anything about getting it published. So it was probably like 3 books, and it really was way too long. And then when I got my publisher, Wild Rose Press, it just turned into like 1 book. But anyway, it was based in Bermuda, in contemporary Bermuda, and also it went back to World War II. And we had vacationed in Bermuda about 12 times, so I was real familiar with it, and I loved Bermuda. And I'm fascinated by World War II because my father was a top turret gunner in flying B-17s over Europe during the war, and I had his diary of missions. So I knew that I wanted it to be World War II, and I wanted it set in Bermuda. And since I knew so much about current Bermuda, I didn't have to do research about the current day, but I did have to do a lot of research. I went to the Decatur Library, and I checked out all these old newspapers from Bermuda and the New York Times and read about World War II and what was happening in Bermuda. And it was called Under the Moon Gate, and that's actually my favorite book. That was my first book and my favorite book. And I'm about to get an audiobook done. I mean, somebody's working on the audiobook now, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. After seeing a project that you've been working on for that long finally come into fruition, and then
no, the next book didn't take that long.
Found a new
Luckily.
rhythm. So what is your general process?
Gone by then. What is my writing process?
Your general process when you're going into a book. Do you have a particular time or setting that you need to be in, routines that you
Yeah,
do?
I write a lot of books about where I travel, places I've traveled to. Most of my books are just set. Well, I mean, some are set in the United States, but a lot are set in Europe and places I've been. And I just decide I get inspired by a certain thing that happened, or I decide I want to set it in a certain place, and sort of that's where I go, from there. So so I really like writing about, and a lot of my books do have a World War II theme. It's not just all about the war, but maybe one character was in the war, or one incident takes place in the war. And I didn't even realize I was doing that until I started looking over my books and thinking, wow, even in my women's fiction, I talk about World War II. So I'm sort of probably obsessed with that time period, because I was born 6 years after the war was over, and that's hard to believe too. But and all the music I listen to, my husband and I listen to, is the 40s. So we're sort of stuck in the 40s. We listen to the music, and all the shows we watch are World War II, or all the books I read are related. Not all of them, but a lot of them are related to World War II. So that's a theme. And then also, I went to college for 6 months in Florence, Italy, and I studied art history. So art and art theft, which also goes back to World War II, figure into a lot of my books. So those are two common themes. But I started out, before the World War II, my first book was World War II, but then I started writing a lot of women's fiction about sort of middle-aged women, romances, and then I sort of got back to historical thrillers, and that's sort of where I am now. But I've also written about vampires and paranormal, and I've really tried sort of a lot of genres. And most people say, stick with one genre, don't experiment, but I disagree with that. And I think a lot of writers are doing that now, is they're experimenting and testing out different genres and voices.
Absolutely.
So I enjoy doing that.
One of the past guests here recently was George Weinstein, the president of Atlanta Writers Club, and
he's great.
talked a lot
like
about
him.
that as well, the crossing over into different genres. Do you find that keeps you more focused or more excited about getting into new themes as you're going into it? And what is that process like when you're going back and forth?
Yeah, it's when you say back and forth, but I only work on one book at a time, so it's not like a back and forth. It's when you're in that book, you're doing that theme. And I was just excited because I like to read thrillers, so I wanted to write some. So it's but some of them do cross genres, because they might be women's fiction, but they also have intrigue, romance, suspense. So a lot of mine aren't just really one thing or the other. It's a combination of themes and genres, really.
When you start a book, do you generally have a basic guideline and plot line set out in your mind that you're going down, or how much room do you give yourself for creative freedom throughout the process of it?
I have total creative freedom, because you're either a pantser or a plotter. Like, you fly by the seat of your pants, or you plot things out and you write an outline. I've never been a plotter. I never write an outline. I just start writing. And so I have total freedom. And sometimes the book doesn't end up the way I intended it to, but it's just the characters sort of take on a life of their own. And I keep thinking about them, like I might wake up in the middle of the night and write something down, and as long as they keep talking to me, the book keeps going. And then when they stop, the book stops. It just works out that way. But one of the things is I can't start a book unless I have the title. So I come up with the title first, and then the names of the main characters, and then I can start writing. But I'm not. Since I majored in journalism, that's one thing, is that I do stick to deadlines, because that's one thing they emphasize in journalism school. You can't miss a deadline. So because I'm deadline oriented, I'm pretty prolific. I think that's where that comes from.
When it comes to deadlines, what's the general time frame that you give yourself or your publisher gives you for specific books?
Well, they don't say, you have to have it by a certain time. It's like, at least with my publisher, when you're done, then, you send it to them and they see if they want it. So it's not, I'm not really on that kind of time frame. Although, like, 1 year I did 4 books, 1 year I did 1 book, 1 year 2 books. It just depends. I mean, there's a book that I'm writing now, and it's taking a lot longer than I thought, because when you write, I mean, you might want to try to write every day, but you've got to do something with the publishing process. Like you might be in production with one book that's already finished, but then you're writing another. You have to worry about the audio books. You have to listen to those. You have to do promotion and social media. So you're always working on something. But there's not, and then with some volunteer activities I'm involved in, there isn't really that much time to write, but as I used to, because now I'm starting to volunteer for things. Like Roswell Reads. I'm the chairman of Roswell Reads, which is a one community, one book program, and we do an event every year. Like last year, we had Rick Bragg as our author, and this year we've got the author of Where the Crawdads Sing, which we're really excited about. That's going to be September 22nd, and that author is coming in, and we have 600 people. We sold out in like 3 or 4 days. So that's taking a lot of planning. But it's all to do with writing, so it's all exciting.
Can you talk a little bit about your most recent collection that I heard you speak about earlier this year at the Novel Idea event called the Saffron Conspiracy?
Right. Okay, I was really excited about that book. I thought of that, or I was inspired to write that book when we went on a river cruise of the Danube. And we went to this small town called Dürnstein, and everybody was going to the wineries, because that's what they're really known for. And so there was like a few people who went on the saffron tour. So we met this real saffron farmer who was trying to reintroduce organic farming of saffron, which is the world's most expensive spice. And actually, in like centuries ago, saffron was produced in Austria, and then they stopped producing it. So he's really reintroducing it. And there's an abbey not far away, which we also visited, that has 2 books written by monks who talked about the saffron process and how to grow saffron, organically. And so he got those books. I mean, he had to do research at the library, and that's how he's producing his saffron. So then I decided, well, every book has to have some kind of, intrigue in it. So I have some kind of there's a little World War II connection, and something about the Abbey that had to do with King Richard. King Richard was held prisoner in this Dürnstein in a castle, and then they paid a ransom for him. But I just everything there is historically accurate, except I made up the part about they paid the ransom and the Abbey kept it, and he discovers that. So, there's a number of people wanting to sort of kill him or get rid of the main character. But it was very exciting to go to the saffron. He's the real farmer is he's a botanist, and he makes saffron products. So he and his wife, they make saffron chocolate, saffron salt, saffron honey, and I've gotten those products, and I send away for them, and usually give them away at readings. And so that's just a little thing that inspired me, and that's usually the way it happens. You just see one thing, and then you just want to keep writing about it.
Your love for traveling, has that always been something that you've enjoyed? And what do you think brought this up?
Yeah, I always say to my husband, you don't take me on enough trips. And he goes, how many, we've already been to Europe once this year. We're going back again. So I love to travel because since I spent 6 months in Italy, and then during the school year, we, would travel all over Europe. So that's what really got me interested in traveling. And I'd probably travel full time if I could. And also, my youngest daughter lives in Munich now. She and her husband are working over there for 2 years. So I miss her and want to visit her. So that's a good excuse that I need to go visit my daughter.
Absolutely, any excuse to get across the pond.
Right. Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the book that you're working on now, the Romanov Legacy?
Right, the one that needs to be going a little bit faster. Yeah. Now, one of the trips we took was to Russia, and then we saw all the, everything there is to see in like St. Petersburg. So that was really exciting. And let's see if I can find this. It's it's a contemporary novel, but it also goes back and it's got a diary of a girl that was, and this is not true, but had an affair with the last Tsar. And so they've had successive generation of women that are related to the last Tsar, who was, killed in 1917. And there's an organization, it's like a romantic thriller of a young single mother who discovers she's descended from Nicholas II, and she becomes the best hope of a secret society called the Guardians of the Romanov Legacy, and they're dedicated to placing a Romanov back on the throne. So, and also she has the key to lost shipment of gold, which there really is the Tsar's lost shipment of gold somewhere in Siberia. So that all sort of interrelates, and so it's got some historical significance, but it's primarily contemporary. And I just found that fascinating. The Tsar and how they murdered the family, and how unfortunate that was. That the family had to pay the price. So I'm excited about it, but it's not moving fast enough, really.
How far along into it are you, and what type of
I'm about halfway finished. About halfway finished. But I'm just going to focus on it now and finish it. Because that's the one thing I did learn when I interviewed different authors, best-selling authors. They all say the most important thing in writing is to finish the book, because you could correct a bad manuscript, but you can't fix a blank page. So they all say that finish it, even if it's terrible. You can always fix it. You can always improve it. So I do hold with that philosophy. I just need to get a move on. Take my own advice.
On that note of editing, how much goes into your process when it comes to that part of the writing routine, and how many drafts do you tend to go through until you get something where you're satisfied with it?
I can't even count how many drafts, because what I do is I edit as I go along, and everybody says don't do that. Just write it and then go back and fix it. But I sort of have to have it perfect as I go along. So I'll write it and then I'll rewrite it, and so I do self-edit throughout the whole process. That could slow you down, but that's what I do.
Well, it seems that there might be something helpful to that in general when you're writing in the way that you talk about as a pantser that's creating on the go. So if you're going back over what you've just written, it keeps you in that flow of the characters and the settings. So it seems that could be a good way to go about it, whether it's generally done or not. But on the theme of books that are completed, you have one that's coming out in 2 days on July 10th?
Yeah, July 10th, and it's a book, again, it's another collaboration with my sister, and let's see if I can, it takes place actually in her hometown, Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and there's a lot of similarities between her and the main character, so she has to tell her husband, I'm really not writing about you, even though the main character has twins, and this woman has twins, and she's an artist, and my sister is an artist. So, but it's got a murder, mystery, romance, but it also is a women's fiction, because it starts out she's in a sort of troubled marriage, and she's not satisfied with her career or where her life is going, and then she has an incident in her front yard with a homeless lawn man who turns out to be her college art professor, and they sort of spark something in each other to improve her art, like he helps her with her art, and then he hasn't been drawing in a long time because his wife has died, and they help each other sort of grow, and then every week he drops off a sketch, and he's really like a world famous artist who sort of dropped off the face of the earth. No one knew what happened to him. Now he's a homeless lawn man, but he drops off a charcoal drawing in front of her front step every week. She gives him art supplies and some food, and anyway, and these drawings she doesn't realize are about, he is sort of drawing her husband and her husband's mistress, and she doesn't realize it. So then there's a big scene in an art gallery when she gets him his own art show, and these pictures are revealed, and then she realizes who it is that he's been trying to draw all that time. So it's women's fiction, but it's also humorous, because humor is one of the things all my books have. Even a book about, my book Stumblestones, which is about the Holocaust, it has light and dark in it. I mean, it sort of offsets each other because it's a dark theme, but you have to have some. But I always just want to put humor in every book. So this one has Groundwork for Murder also has humor in it.
Can you talk with this book that's coming out later this week a little bit on the technical aspect of what it's like when you're usually writing alone, but in this case collaborating, and not only collaborating but with a family member? What's the what goes into
the dynamic?
That? How to get together and write? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so we live in different cities too. So she's in Florida and I'm in Georgia. So I'll just say, she is an artist. She's a great artist, and the main character is an artist, and so the hero and heroine are both artists. So I'll say, well, we need a scene outdoors, and it needs, and so she brings her expertise into writing about how she paints and the process, and then we'll take, she'll write something, I'll write something, and then I'll put it together, and so it's seamless, and you can't tell who's writing what part. And another thing is we got together. I mean, we were reading over our lines, our manuscript, and some of the sort of steamier parts, and I go, I did not write this. I could not have written this. And she goes, well, I didn't write it. And I go, well, one of us must have written it. So it sort of got lost as like, which one of us wrote those sex scenes? And it didn't. Neither one of us wanted to admit that we wrote it, but we forgot which one of us had done that. So anyway, but it's really fun working with her. So on the play and on this book.
You obviously have a good organic mind meld that goes into it, so it must come across seamlessly there with the two writers coming together. Are there any plans or events lined up for the release of the book?
Yeah, we're having, on July 10th, we're having a sort of a book release. It's sort of online where we're going to go to about 30 different blogs. And so I'll just, we'll just go every day, maybe 5 different blogs, and we'll interact with the people who are hopefully going on the blog. And then I'm going to be on like it's called the Murder Book blog, and then I'll be talking about it at the Decatur Book Festival also, that and the Saffron Conspiracy. And also I'll be talking about writing historical romance at the Georgia Romance Writers Convention or conference this year. So, yeah, I mean, you can't do enough promotion, but we're going to start, the day of the launch.
Good news. On the note of the workshops you're presenting coming up soon at the Decatur Book Festival, can you give a little taste of some of the tips that you'll be going over?
Well, this is going to be, actually, I'm supposed to be talking about the Saffron Conspiracy, which is not women's fiction. It's actually the main character is a man. It's a historical thriller, but that was the book when I got selected for the festival. And now since I've written this women's fiction, Groundwork for Murder, and it's going to be a panel. So, we'll have a moderator and they'll be asking questions, but it'll be focused on women's fiction, which I've written a lot of, but just so happens I could talk about both books, but the book I guess I'll be focusing on is the Saffron Conspiracy.
What has the reception been since the Saffron Conspiracy was released earlier this year?
I think people are interested. I've given some talks at different book clubs, and like this one book club I made a talk at, there was a little children's nursery rhyme like paddock cake, but it's about a Gugelhof cake it's a German cake, and it's sort of featured in the book. So I had to go all over Atlanta, through the phone, and try to find a baker who could make a Gugelhof cake, and there was not one baker in the whole city. Well, I finally found this one guy near Dobbins Air Force Base, which is like an hour from me, and he goes, I was just thinking about making a Gugelhof cake. He's German, and his daughter had just bought him some. The Gugelhof cake is really a bundt cake made with saffron, and she bought him some molds to make it, and he goes, so he made them special for this talk that I made. It was like the best cake I've ever tasted. It was so good. So I went over there for an hour and picked up the cakes, and yes, it was. So it's exciting. And then I usually give away some saffron honey or saffron salt or saffron chocolate that I got from this the saffron farmer. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you can continue.
No, just I went on this tour, I guess it was 2 years ago, but since my daughter lives in Germany, she orders it for me and sends it to me, or I will go pick it up, some of these products. So it sort of like comes alive, and it's pretty exciting.
Does sound like a fun event. What have some of the other highlights over the last 6 or 7 years since you started publishing these novels been with events that you've been able to attend or read at?
Let's see. I like the Decatur Book Festival. I really enjoy because, like 1 year I talked about my book about the vampires next door, which is different, and now I'll be talking about women's fiction, and so I've talked about a lot of different genres there, and I really enjoy that. I've been to this Barbara Vay's Readers Conference she has every year in Milwaukee, and there's like 600 readers there, and that was a good I went not this year but last year. That was a great experience. One time my sister and I went to a lighthouse. I guess our most unique book signing was a lighthouse in St. Augustine, and that was very interesting because we also, I think we wrote like a short story or something called it wasn't really a novel, it was more of a short story, but it featured St. Augustine, so that the lighthouse, I guess, was the most unusual signing. But I do a lot of speeches about Stumblestones, not just the novel, but the Stumblestones project in Germany. And when I went over there to Berlin and when I visited, I didn't even know what Stumblestones were. So since I've found that they're like a 4x4 square. They look sort of bronze, and they're embedded in the cement in front of the homes of people who were taken away to the Holocaust. So that was their last free place to live before they were, rounded up. So they're something like 60,000 of them all over Europe. And if you look down, you're bound to see one, but I never looked down because I didn't know what they were. And then I had a neighbor who moved to Germany, and he said, did you ever see these? I have a stumblestone in front of my house. And so he sent me some information. I started researching it, and there's one artist who actually makes these stumblestones, and he actually installs them right in front of all the houses. This is his lifelong project, his life's work. So I've learned so much about that, his Stumblestone project, that I talk about the book, and then I talk about the Holocaust Project. And it's like a memorial so that people, if you look down, you can actually see. And it's got the when they were born, when they died, where they died, and how they died. So it's like a little commemoration, and you sort of walk by it. in front of somebody's house. Or if the house is gone, they'll still put the stone there. There might be a hotel in front of it, but it's really fascinating. So that was another book that just because a neighbor wrote me an email, that's how I learned about that book.
It's wonderful how ideas can just be generated. You never know, random circumstances in life. Are there any other destinations that you haven't been to yet in the world that are at the top of your list, and any other ideas floating around that you have for books?
Well, including books I've already written, like the Saffron Conspiracy, also had a part in Scotland because I had visited Scotland with my older daughter, and it sort of takes place half in Scotland and half in Austria. So it's pretty much everywhere I go I've written about, and a lot, like I said, in Bermuda, and then I'm from Florida, so I've written a lot of books about, that were based in Florida. But I think I've gone to so many places. We're trying to figure out where to go, and there's a lot of places I haven't been that I want to go back to the same places that I really like, actually. But I haven't been to Portugal. That's one place I want to go that I haven't been. Or maybe South Africa or the Galapagos. Those are 3 places I haven't been. So I won't get the idea till I go there probably. But you can get ideas from anywhere. I mean, like one of the common places is eavesdropping. Like if you're at a hairdresser or you're at a restaurant or a grocery store or even on an airplane, I got the idea for my novel Sixth Sense. It's about a secret society of psychics. While I was on a plane trip from Atlanta to Sydney, Australia, and I sat next to a psychic and her publicist, and they were talking about, all their cases. And this was the time when they had the SARS virus had just broken out, and they were both wearing face masks and coughing, and I was sitting next to them. And so for 20 hours I was listening to them, and I wrote about this serial killer in Sydney, Australia. So that was just an eavesdropping on an airplane. And then I've got the novel Stones was actually called the Colonoscopy Club, and they said they don't like that title, so they changed it to Stones. And I like jewelry, and the heroine was the manager of a jewelry boutique. So I put my likes in there and places I've been. And for names, like I was at the Georgia Aquarium and I heard a mother calling her children. She had Hayden and Taylor, and I thought, oh, those are nice names. So I first come up with the characters' names and the title, and then I write the book. And I heard this word like confrontation. I thought, wow, that sounds like a good name, and I set one of my books Landlocked in North Carolina in that fictional town. So you can get ideas, like I said, eavesdropping or character names or traveling. I wrote The Widow's Gallery, and that was partially took place on a Mediterranean cruise. So I got some ideas for that. And you can have dreams. You can wake up in the middle of the night and think of something. Or when you're talking to people, you have conversations. But I have another sister who forbids me to write anything that she says in a book. Every time she calls, she goes, no, don't use this in a book. Except she did let me use it one time in this book, Landlocked, and because this is a person who had weather issues, and she's afraid of weather, tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that. So, and that book was about my father owned some property in North Carolina, and then when we went to sell it, when he passed away, we couldn't sell it because it was landlocked. We didn't have an easement on any parts of the property except the property itself, so we couldn't leave the property legally. So that was sort of written about that. So there's always some personal element in there. And then, that was a real life experience. And then I wrote a book called Significant Others because my mother was living in a sort of an adult community and a retirement condo, and all the residents had lost a spouse and they were experiencing love the second time around. So my mother called me one day and she said, I saw the image of Jesus in a live oak tree on the golf course in her backyard. And she really did, and I went down there and it really was. And so that's how that was the intro to the book. And then I interviewed a lot of the residents to find out, you know, there are sort of second time around love stories, and that's what this was. And it also had a World War II theme because I used my father's bombing missions in that one. And then there's another book that I wrote called Homecoming Homicides. When I saw my daughter in a college homecoming pageant, and I observed this man getting the girls' autographs and wondered what would happen if he were a serial killer. So everything really has a reason that it was written. And you can, like I say, use your hobbies or interests, or you get a lot of ideas reading other books. Not like you're copying them, but you just, the more you read, the better writer you are. I believe that. I might read about 3 books a week. And you can think, wow, that was a great book. I'd like to write something as good as that. So that's very helpful. And then other people, like I said, my neighbor who told me about Stumblestones, you can learn from just what other people tell you. Or then sometimes ideas just come to you, like in the cosmos, like they're floating out there, and you have to be receptive to them. And a lot of times 2 authors will come up with the same concept independently. I'm not talking about one specific. There's 2 books that are coming out that are about the same exact thing, and they're so remote, they were random that they couldn't possibly have done it, but they did it. So it's not like they're copying each other, but things are out there, and you just have to be open to them. And those are just some of the places I get my inspiration.
Absolutely. It is sort of like we're downloading from the ether almost in certain circumstances, and you never know how those neurons are going to trigger and spark in different directions. So it's beautiful to chase down all those different avenues. What is it that
I believe that, really.
Well, before I ask that question,
okay,
let me ask you, you're talking about different ideas of where you get your inspiration. What are some ideas from other writers and advice that you've gotten through the years that you would like to pass on to listeners?
Well, I guess the main thing is what I've talked about before is finish the book. They all say that. Like, I interviewed Steve Barry and Daniel Silva and Janet Ivanovich for different newsletters when I was in Georgia Romance Writers. I was their newsletter editor. And not, just brief interviews. It could have been in an online book signing, or some of them were interviews. And they all said the same thing: finish the book. Finish the book, because you're never going. There's so many people who want to write a book and they never finish it, and so that's the best advice that they all give. That was the advice that to a person: finish the book. So that's the thing that stuck in my mind.
Absolutely, staying disciplined and on task,
right.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that originally brought you here to Georgia, and have you ever thought about writing, if you haven't already, a book set here?
I actually, the book Sixth Sense starts out, it's about an Atlanta police detective in Midtown, so that was based in Georgia, but then he goes to Sydney, Australia to catch a serial killer, and he gets involved with a psychic, and she helps him solve those murders, and then she finds out that her parents were murdered, and she wasn't who she thought she was, and then they go to Florida and find out about her mother, who was a psychic, and her father, who was was a serial killer too. So that was a book that was set in Atlanta. And another one that inspired me that was from real life was called The Alibi, and it was a cozy mystery and a women's fiction and a suspense and romance. When I was graduated college, I went to work for AT&T in public relations, but then my husband got a job in Tallahassee, so I had to quit. We moved back to Tallahassee, and I worked for the prison system for a year doing public relations. So I wrote a book about that. I mean, it wasn't really about me, but it was a book about a PR person who sort of served as an alibi for her boss who had murdered someone. So really, you can get an idea anywhere.
Here in the last few minutes of the show, can you talk a little bit about where people should go and check out your website to find out more about your books and where they can connect with you on social media?
Yeah, okay. It's www.marilynbarron.com, and they can go on my website. And then I have, let's see, I mean, I have a Facebook account. It's just, you could just put Marilyn Barron in there, and a Twitter account is @Marilyn Barron. So I'm on Facebook all the time. And then if you go onto my website, you can see the different places that I'll be and the dates and the times under appearances. So, yeah, I like to connect with readers, and I enjoy hearing about it because you never know. One word that somebody says in a conversation could spark an idea for a book.
Absolutely, especially with what you've said here tonight. It sounds like the ideas are coming at you fast and furious wherever you're at in the world. So just got to seize that inspiration whenever it comes.
I had one book called The Siege, and that took place in Crete, in Greece. And I had visited Crete 15 years ago, and I never even thought anything of it. And then I found out of a real sort of incident that happened there during World War II when the whole community was really wiped out. And that sort of was the setting for my book. So it's anything can spark it's sort of a historical nugget of information, and you decide where you want to set it, and that piece of information you can weave into a book. So it's really exciting, I guess, to learn more about different places and just come up with that creative element.
Here in the closing moments, are there any final words you want to leave the listeners with?
Let's see. I think you should follow your dreams, and you might think, well, maybe I want to write, and if you don't have enough confidence, just do it. And also join some organizations like Georgia Writers Club and Georgia Romance Writers, and they really, help you along. You'll find people with interests like your own, and you're not like alone out there. Everybody's going through the same process, trying to get published, and whether you want to publish with a big publisher or a small press or self-publish, you learn all those things in these organizations, and that's really the thing that helped me the most, and I would recommend that. And then just read as much as you can. And I read in all. I do like spies and thrillers and World War II, but I read in all genres. So reading and also writing as often as you can. I mean, and joining organizations, taking craft classes in writing, and going to conferences, because then you can connect with editors and agents. So that's probably the best advice I have.
Well, that's definitely good advice. That camaraderie of being around other like-minded individuals and artists and writers is a very important aspect of this whole field. And so I think that's a good note to end on. I want to thank you so much, Marilyn, for coming on. It's been exciting hearing about all your novels, and want to wish you the best this Wednesday with the release of Groundwork for Murder to you and your sister, and hope that goes well, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you having me on, and I enjoyed meeting you in person, and this was fun talking on the radio with you.
Absolutely. Enjoyed this conversation very much, and thanks for appearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, thanks to Marilyn Barron for coming on tonight, and please visit her website at marilynbarron.com to check out all the books that we just heard her talk about, and we'll be back next Monday on the 15th We'll talk to you then. Selah.